welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, July 13th, 2017. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani, back inside our New York City studio. Also back, it's the A-Team. Perfect timing. So much to discuss. One of the craziest weeks, I think, in our sports history, in combat sports history. So this is going to be a very fun show. Buckle up. You know that man. That is Luke Thomas of SiriusXM and MMAfighting.com. He is back. Welcome back, Luke. You know that man. That is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall of MMAfighting.com and The Ringer. I like that. That was nice.
No more heart?
That's new.
That's at the end.
I like that.
Okay. Yep.
And of course, that is the man in the shirt, Jeff Wagenheim of the Washington Post. Okay, guys, what are we going to start with? Maybe the tough finale, the Tuesday Night Contender Series. What do you think?
Snoopcast.
Yes, Snoopcast. Maybe we break that down. No, of course, we must start with the World Tour. 2 legs down. Stop number 3 is just a few hours away, not too far from here in Brooklyn, New York. Can't wait for that. And so I'm so excited to talk to you guys because, look, I've been in LA and then I was in Toronto and I've been around everyone who's kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and we're all kind of losing our minds and it's been the craziest week and really, for me, the most interesting experience of my career. I mean, I can talk about it more, and yes, absolutely, and that is probably putting it mildly. I will never forget this, but why I want to talk to you guys so much is because you're watching it from a different perspective. I'm sitting there talking to Mark Ramundi and Casey and Esther, and they're all experiencing it, and there's an energy in there, but you guys are watching it from home. So my first question right off the bat, from your perspective, from the home viewer perspective, has this been a success? Are you enjoying it thus far?
Oh, it's been a massive success. I mean, who could say, who could look at this and be like, what a failure? Just really didn't do anything to hype about. No, it's been a tremendous success. I mean, I do think in the bubble, you guys are a little bit more excited, which is totally understandable and obviously human reaction. I think from the outside looking in, I've got a slightly more, I don't know how you feel, but a slightly more measured response that it hasn't, I mean, it's been incredible, but you know, as the world turns kind of scenario, the only thing that's been kind of interesting is not to say that there hasn't been tremendous enthusiasm. I mean, look at this crowd in Toronto and even the LA one and all the media that's there. I mean, all of that is absolutely grand. What's kind of interesting has been the essential MMA takeover of it. It's a boxing fight with the biggest boxer. It's essentially a boxing style press conference, although it's been adapted somewhat. But if you look on Twitter, if you look on boxing websites, there is coverage of it, but it's very different. It's muted. Some of my favorite boxing writers aren't even talking about it. Steve Kim, who I absolutely adore, hasn't hardly said a word about it. It's been very much boxing fight, big boxer. But there's a lot of the boxing media who are kind of like, it's the MMA audience that's showing up to see Conor and rooting everybody on. It's the MMA media, I think, is doing the heavy lifting.
Can you talk about that a little more? Do you feel the same way? Because I find that to be fascinating that they are ignoring. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, it is a boxing match. It is him trying to break Marciano's record. Isn't that, I mean, isn't that reckless to ignore it from a journalistic standpoint?
We're making an analogy, like, you know, you're watching Brendan Schaub and you're watching Paulie squaring off. And I was saying, you know, you watch them and basically what you're seeing is one guy from the boxing realm, a very lived-in sport that has been through this a million, or they've been, maybe not this circus atmosphere, but understanding the fight game to generations, you know. And he's sitting there patiently letting the MMA guy blow up and try to convince you. I feel like that's the perfect kind of symbol of how this fight feels to me right now. It just feels like the MMA side is showing up gangbusters, and they, you know, because this is like something that we've never experienced, where the boxing side, they treat it more like a circus, or maybe they wouldn't deign to cover it because it's too much spectacle or something like that. But it'd be interesting to see in the end how many of those guys actually do come out. You know that a lot of the ones that we're talking about probably will in the end, but I agree. I kind of agree with you. I've had moments where, especially the Toronto one, where I'm basically watching it and you think, this is crazy. This is beyond anything that because even to wrap your mind around this thing at all to begin with is hard. But then you start getting into these things, like you mentioned, it is like theater. These guys are up there performing. Yeah. And now you could look at that and be like, well, that's not genuine then, or it's not, but it is. It's still genuine in this very strange way, like this, the flag and the money and all this stuff. I mean, it's so much going on. I go through a lot of different emotions on it. Some of it's gratuitous, like this is too excessive. Some of it's like, you know, just in awe that these guys are pulling this off. It's just been a very, very weird thing. And I guess I kind of get the idea, because you guys have been doing a good job of showing the crowd and everything, just how nuts, though, the general public is perceiving this. To me, that is really cool elements of this. But man, just to watch it from afar on your computer and stuff, I mean, it's been a very weird time for that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to where your base question, is this a success? There are so many different layers to what how you would define success. Obviously, as entertainment, there's no question. It is highly entertaining, especially yesterday's Toronto one. I thought the LA one, if they all were like the LA one, I would have been like, whatever.
Feels like they were getting their legs now.
I feel like the Toronto one was gangbusters success, entertainment-wise. But then beyond that, for me, part of the charm of this, because I don't really care how many pay-per-views they sell. That's not really my interest. My interest is how these guys are going to compete with each other, come August 26th. And in order to, Mayweather is completely looking at this as a salesman. He's saying, I need to build up McGregor to be somebody who skeptics are going to think, well, maybe this guy can give him a fight. And he's managed to do that. McGregor's task is very different, though. McGregor has to not only make himself look to the public like a real fighter, a real contender, a real boxer, but he also, I think, from a competitive angle, he has to somehow get into Mayweather's head. And that was, I think a lot of us who've written stories, I certainly did, and I know, Chuck, your story, when this first was announced, all said the one chance that McGregor has is if he can get Mayweather to not fight like Mayweather, the same way that he made Jose Aldo not fight like Jose Aldo. No, not at all. Because Mayweather's laughing at him. There's no, from an entertainment perspective, big success. But from a competitive angle, McGregor has made absolutely no headway in getting into Floyd's head. We will see whether that changes, when like the weigh-ins and fight week. But to this point, not at all.
Look, we won't really know until fight night.
Sure.
Right. Fight night comes around, and Floyd's Floyd. You're like, oh, right, this didn't do anything.
Right.
And if he's not, you can look back to that day in Toronto and maybe wonder, wow, was that the moment that the worm kind of turned? But been this big. It's been this big thing everyone's doing, and at first I was like, what are we doing? And then it sort of dawned on me that it all made sense. But I don't think we're still getting it right, which is to say we're scoring these press conferences.
It's a fascinating thing.
It's bizarre until you think about it. It's like one guy is performing, it's like 8 Mile, then the next guy is responding.
It is.
But the response, I think, needs to be as follows. Everyone's like, oh my God, he choke slammed Floyd, and I'm like, okay, look. If the question is who won the insult contest, Conor tap danced on his grave. This was an easy call. But Floyd doesn't give a shit if you think he is funny. He wants, people keep asking me who won. I'm like, well, let's see. Floyd's probably going to get $250 million. Exactly. Conor's going to get 100, of which the UFC gets a piece.
Last night. Sure. I had everybody saying that same thing.
So the point being is, everyone's like, who won? I'm like, well, you guys hate Mayweather so much you want to give him money to see if Conor can beat him. Every time Mayweather wins.
But I think what the scoring is about, and I've done it as well, is kind of treating this like a 4-part series. And because the first leg in Los Angeles, Conor was caught off guard. He did not know that it was going to go down that way. And then you have the storylines that are starting to build up. Conor versus Showtime, Conor versus the book bag, Conor versus Floyd Senior. These are actual storylines that have started in the past couple days. And I think the fun part is, okay, Floyd got the best of him in LA. Let's see how he responds.
Best of him in what, though? But again, if it's just an insult contest, this is never going to be a contest of either Floyd. I thought Floyd Senior would do better. He got torn to pieces, too. But the point being is, this is ultimately a contest neither guy is going to win. But that's not the game they're playing. No. We're scoring a game that Mayweather's not playing.
Sure. To a degree. I will say this, though. You said that he didn't get under his skin, that Conor didn't get under his skin. I don't subscribe to the theory that Floyd got ethered, or he's embarrassed, or he's in the corner crying.
He got destroyed, bro. Hashtag 13 seconds.
But I will say this. If you don't think that Floyd Mayweather has turned back the clock in the sense that he has gone back to the Floyd Mayweather that fought Ricky Hatton and Oscar De La Hoya, the brash, obnoxious Floyd Mayweather who fought Pacquiao and Cotto and Canelo.
Statesman.
He's boring. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's not this Floyd.
No.
Floyd Mayweather came prepared, and he upped the ante in Toronto, and I suspect he will do the same in Brooklyn. And so, to a degree, Conor is in his head. He knew that he had to come. He couldn't be Mr. Nice Guy with Conor. He had to get personal with Conor, and he's even saying, "Come London, we'll talk about women." He's planting seeds.
Okay, but is that
you're talking about Floyd? You're talking about Floyd the salesman. Floyd, Floyd is a salesman.
Of course,
in LA, in Toronto, in New York, in London. Those are, he could be in his head in terms of, Floyd says, look at this guy. This guy is willing to do all this. I'm going to jump in here with him, and we're going to make this thing the biggest. There's no doubt this is going to be bigger than the Pacquiao fight now. There's absolutely no doubt because people, the Pacquiao fight drew every boxing fan on the planet, plus a lot of interest. Other people.
But it also fizzled on the way to the fight, right? You were there. By fight time, there was no heat between them.
Because it wasn't an interesting build-up. This is going to be an interesting build-up. But the getting into his head part only matters.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that he is aware of the fact that I have to be ready. This guy is going to hit me below the belt. And so to me, the big story thus far, 2 days in, is that Floyd has turned back the clock. He could have just rode this wave out and said, ha, 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 I'm going to laugh to the bank. He's not doing that. He's getting personal.
Because he's going to go,
he's taking shots
he's going to laugh his way to the
which
bank
is making
with
this
a
great.
heavier bag of money.
But he is getting involved in the war of words, and that's what people wanted.
Okay, but let me ask you this.
He didn't have to.
But what is the ultimate significance of this? Because I think the jaundiced view might be, you're right. I mean, there's no doubt this is a very different Floyd. Even Hatton couldn't do this to him, and Hatton was, aggressive. But ultimately, I don't know what purpose this serves. I feel like so Conor's always staying on the stage, and then Floyd wakes up with, the Wu-Tang Clan. There's 40 people behind him. And the whole time, all I can think is Floyd must be saying to himself, hallelujah. I finally got somebody who's going to get
for sure.
me
For
rich.
sure he's thinking
It's not a function of I better emotionally steel myself.
No.
I've got to entertain the fans because I'm going to get
But the more he speaks, the more pay-per-view buys will come on August 26th. And I'd love to have this conversation next week if you guys attend today, because there is an emotion in that building, in the vicinity of those two individuals. And I said it on Twitter today. It amazes me that they have shown the restraint to not touch each other. And you made the joke that there's money involved. Trust me, you feel like the place is going to explode.
Yes.
When Conor walks by him, you were like, is he going to touch him right now? When he took the flag, I thought there would be a riot. It's a different feeling when you're there. It is theater at its finest, but there is a lot of emotion involved here.
It's not real. It is theater.
It is real.
We are in Manhattan right now.
Real.
It is real.
Let's go up to Broadway. They are really great actors up on Broadway.
This is not acting.
It is totally acting because
they are
Floyd
doing
Graves,
this with the knowledge in mind that they are going to sell pay-per-view.
They are dialed up to 11.
Sure, but with that, if you have 60,000 people saying F the Mayweathers and eating every single word that you're saying, you are going to act like that, right?
This was
it's
real.
An ego trip.
Yeah, but how much of that ultimately is real if you're just screaming, you're a bitch, he's boxing's bitch, and I'm blah,
If this was real, you know what? You know that big bag of money when Conor pulled that thing of money out. If this was real, you know where that money would have gone? He would have opened that packet and it would have gone into the crowd. That would have been real. That would have been real. Floyd with the flag, he would have done. He would have done. He would have ripped the Irish flag in half. That would have been real.
No,
then we would have seen something. But that's not going to happen.
He doesn't want to riot. Because
it's not
to your point, this is the guy who fought De La Hoya, which I thought was the end of the Pretty Boy Floyd era. Right. Because remember how he walked into the ring when he fought De La Hoya?
He wore the
He
sombrero.
had an oversized. He put it on backwards. Mexican sombrero with all the clothes out there trolling everybody, not giving a damn, but just trying to do everything, even till the bitter end, to get you to pay attention, to give him money. Always remember something about this. Last thing about this, because I know I've gone
no last thing. We're going 4 hours on this.
Here's what I mean. This is all I want to warn MMA fans about. The major, and you might feel this too, we'll see what happens on August 26th, but every time I've covered a Floyd fight, it ends. The first feeling I get is, fuck, man. This guy conned us again.
Yeah.
He got us again. And so always understand, when he's out there playing this game with Conor, at the end of the day, I think he just goes back to his jet and he's like, did I do enough to con the audience today? Not, did I win the insult contest? So everyone would be like, he got ethered. Well, yeah, he did get ethered, but he doesn't give a damn.
No. But there is an element of suspending disbelief, right? Like, can we just be fans? Like, every time you talk about the money and this and that, like, just, you know what? Sometimes it's fun to just enjoy the circus, right?
It's always funny to me. Like,
the circus is...
We're going to charge you $100 for this fight, and yet we're going to talk about all this money we got. It's always like this inverse psychology or something like that going on where you're like, how is the money? How are you telling the people are going to bring you the money? Like, check out all this money we're getting from, it's that element of the money Mayweather thing is always funny to me. Although I get too that it's part of a gimmick too. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing. But
sure, there is pro wrestling involved in this, like that psychology of playing a character. But there are elements like when he's talking about, you work for Dana White, or Dana and I don't have to wear suits. We're old rich, you're new rich. This is all
his best thing was probably when he said,
facts, right?
When he went over to Dana White and he said, you're rich, you've got money, I've got money, and excluded Conor. I felt like that's the one blow he landed where I was like, that probably gets to Conor a little bit. Because Conor's doing fine for himself, but nobody can say right now that he's doing what Mayweather or Dana
talking about tapping, talking about being a quitter.
I thought his opening line was the best. He's like, no matter what, the fans can't fight for you.
Yeah,
that's right.
I was like, it's not a good zing, but it matters.
This is great.
But you know what? In wrestling, in the WWE, when these guys are going at each other, all the people in the background, all the like sort of supporting actors, so to speak, they're all playing along with it. They're all part of the show.
Yeah.
This thing on the stage, you see like Conor and Floyd like staring at each other intently and yelling at each other in the background. There's Ellerby like laughing. There's Dana White with like a big stupid grin on his face. I mean, there's nobody else is really buying it except these two guys and the crowd.
No, well, if you're there, you see that the security guards are like almost like in the ready, set, go position to jump in there if need be. Even Jalen Rose was there in Los Angeles on Tuesday. There's like, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, I experienced it and you guys didn't, but I'm here to offer a different perspective. There is a sort of tension in the air. There's something there.
I thought when he grabbed the flag yesterday, to your point, I even tweeted this, I was like, this is turning into the Cuban Missile Crisis, where nothing happened. But that almost could have been a dark turn. Yes. Mayweather's restraint there actually was because Conor's like, if you do anything to that flag, I'm coming across. And
when he stood up, I was like,
it was Conor actually stealing the bag. And again, this is not, if this was planned, if this was fake, Conor stealing the bag, like Mayweather gets that flag, Conor doesn't get the bag, doesn't have anything. Maybe he rubs his butt with it, and then what happens? No, seriously, that's what I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to blow his nose or something like that. And then there's this, like, the Showtime thing. You really think that they went in the back and were
that's
like,
definitely real.
Stephen Espinosa, I'm going to call you a weasel?
No, I'm sure this is all spontaneous.
Knockdown. This is absurd.
But that's
this is happening in front of us.
But that's more credibility for Mayweather and McGregor, both of them, by doing all these different things to kind of, generate more excitement. What's better than going up to the head of Showtime and sort of calling him out? That's gold. But who was laughing? Who was enjoying it more than anybody in the room? Stephen Espinosa.
I don't know, but read the article that Mark Raimondi wrote. He was not
he didn't
pleased.
He actually said he might respond.
Yes, he was not pleased. I mean, we posted an interview with him, and every comment was about being a weasel.
He's the new T.J. Dillashaw.
Just
Again,
like that.
I feel like we're looking at it from different perspectives. Of course, the whole purpose of this is to generate interest and money and excitement, but they have to deliver.
And they did.
And they are both delivering, right?
Well,
I mean, we all thought that it would be like...
And from the reverse, right? Like, because you see Mayweather, the most fascinating thing to me was how would Mayweather, what was he going to look like against this? Because we knew what Conor, coming from the MMA side, we knew what Conor was going to do. But it was cool watching him when they did that first stare-off in Los Angeles where he just stood there. He didn't do anything. It was like he was announcing his imperviousness to whatever was going to happen for the rest of the tour. It was like, that was the coolest moment in this weird way, because I was like, here we are, they're standing together. Conor starting doing his dance, and he's jawing at him, and Mayweather just stood there doing nothing. And that escalation is fun, because if you going back to like McGregor's other fights, there's always a psychological interplay that starts it. And I think that people are really interested. When he got that Diaz fight, the biggest intrigue of all was like, oh, how are these guys going to interact? Like, this is going to be epic, Right. This has that vibe too, because you're taking two components and putting them together. And just knowing Mayweather is basically unaffected is its own thing. It's very subtle, but the way that he's handled himself has been I think he's done great in terms of just being like...
Yeah, not better than McGregor, but enough to just play the role.
And each time, people are booing him, and you've been there, you've seen what's going on, and what does he do? Hard work. He just starts it off. It's like he doesn't hear any of it. I love that. I love his approach on this stuff.
Here's the other thing to consider that really occurred to me yesterday. I mean, we always kind of knew this. You could piece it together. But when you see them face off, you realize they're very similar people.
Yeah.
They're so identical. They both have this fascination with money, and they're in different stages of their life, 28, 40. But this idea of having flash and demonstrating it and wanting to be a promoter and a fighter and in control and letting you know they're in control. I mean, to what extent they hate each other, I don't know. But I think they hate each other as competitors, and they love each other as people who have the same kind of vision about themselves.
Yes. There is 100% of mutual respect.
That's what's great, though.
But they have the same world outlook, do they not?
Yeah,
I mean, they're very similar people.
But I guess my overall feeling about the lack of realism here is, let's imagine that instead of Floyd Mayweather, you got Daniel Cormier sitting there. And let's imagine instead of Conor McGregor, you got John Jones there. And let's imagine those two guys interacting on a stage and going right up into each other's faces and calling each other bitches and all this stuff. Do you think that thing would last? No, that thing would turn into a fight. We've seen it happen already, and it would happen again. These two guys, the LA one, I was like, wow, what's going to happen with these guys? But it's already become very clear to me that no, these guys are very much, they know what they're doing.
But they're fighting for 500,000. These two are fighting for $500 million.
And they know what they're doing. They know
50%
what they're doing.
What happens in London? When that place is
London is
100%
not, I was thinking about this.
Irish.
London is not Dublin.
Yes.
But it ain't too far from it.
It is not. This thing is only 50% done.
Right, but what...
Think about what people were saying after LA. The microphones, this guy was talking too much, and now think about how the narrative has kind of changed.
Yeah, but again, if they go out there today in Brooklyn and the Irish show up and it's ole, 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 everyone's going to be like, oh man, Floyd got ethered. No. And Floyd's going to go back and he goes, I convinced more dullards to pay me on August 26th. Thank you.
I don't think anyone is denying that, or at least anyone with any kind of knowledge of what is going on here. To me, it's just amazing. I mean, they both deserve a lot of credit. I think on this planet Earth, there are maybe 4 people living and breathing who could do what they are doing. And what I mean by that is walk up there and essentially deliver monologues filled with insults, filled with oohs and ahs, and then go back and forth and put on, this showcase with the flag and the book. I mean, this is true theater. It's unbelievable. Like, you mentioned DC and Jones. Love those guys. They can't pull this off.
Exactly.
They could not pull this off.
I'm not saying that these guys are.
They might be the only two. They really might be.
They're less than DC and Jones. I'm saying these guys are better promoters because they can do all this stuff and not have it come to blows. DC and Jones, as soon as they start insulting each other, or one guy leans his forehead and the other guy, all of a sudden it goes. Well,
Dana White did mention that.
Let's not mention that, nitwit. There's absolutely no call for that. Really, you look at the backdrop of that thing. There's no.
He has been doing a great job of sort of inserting himself in all the photos. And,
did you see the Deadspin article about him?
No, I did not.
It's like, we're tired of seeing Dana White's face in photos. If you notice, they always get the 2 fighters like this, and then there's Dana White's head in between. It's actually a pretty good article.
The reason I mention it is because there seems to be some sort of agreement that they cannot touch each other, like within the contract. So
didn't Dana White say Al Heyman made it clear to him?
Yeah.
That
So obviously
he has to be. So he has to that's not why he's there. He's there.
No.
A stupid T-shirt.
No. I'm saying that's
on the camera.
Obviously Conor's smart enough to know, but look, we've seen him hit Nate Diaz. We've seen him throw. I'm just wondering, come London, I'm not ready to completely write off the fact that they are going to, agree to not touch each other.
Ultimately, in something, in a moment, you know what I mean? If anybody's going to do it, it's not going to be Floyd. It's going to be Conor, because at some point he doesn't care on some level. You know what I mean? That's what makes him fun on that level. I was going to say, it's funny, you mentioned who could pull this off. One of the things is these guys are at a level that nobody can ascend to. But what are they doing on that level? They're shining their brightest. That's the hardest trick. Most of these guys, they can't even get to this level. But certainly if there's some people who might have enough to get to a certain level, but they wouldn't know how to handle once it gets that big. These guys have handled themselves supremely well.
Yeah.
And I know that I hate when people make these Muhammad Ali things toward Conor McGregor or anybody, but honestly, this is the closest MMA has seen to a Muhammad Ali-sized effort, where you're seeing something like, whoa, this is actually 100%. That big,
But here's the difference, and for now, here's the difference, which is that ultimately we have to wait until August 26th. One, to see if Floyd is in fact impacted by everything that's happening. But if the fight ends up being what Floyd thinks it's going to be, how will we review this in hindsight? In other words, Ali would go out there and absolutely torment Frazier, and then they would get to work on each other. Right? It would everything matched. If we have this incredible circus and then the fight is terrible, I think in retrospect we're going to say to ourselves,
that's what I've said.
Maybe that's all that there was just this.
It's funny you say that, because on our wrap-up show yesterday, I said the complete opposite, which was, if Conor is able to pull off the incredible, the unfathomable, the legend of this press tour
will be incredible,
right?
Yes,
people
it works both ways.
Yes, exactly.
Look like a
so maybe I prefer to look at it that way.
Yes.
Because
I should say it works either way. Yes.
It does, because people will look back on what transpired here and say 16,000 people showed up in the rain in Toronto to watch these guys. I mean, our Esther Lynn, I mean, we are seeing iconic photos just being delivered in real time. I mean, this stuff is just unbelievable. And so I just hope that people are enjoying it. And again, maybe I might have this sort of distorted view of it all because I'm feeling it. Let me ask you guys this. On Monday, before this started, did you have a sense for, and I know you talked about you don't care about the pay-per-views, but I do think it's an important part because the Pacquiao fight is the record holder and people are wondering if this can beat it. Do you think 2 stops in that there is more interest in the fight? Or is it just kind of like what we expected? Do you feel like it has crossed into a different stratosphere at this point because of what has happened?
I do to an extent, but it's working the way it should. In terms of if you just kind of measure it off of people talking about it that wouldn't normally probably, you know, like I see people who I know for a fact do not follow the fight game on Twitter and things like that talking about it. And once that starts to happen, you feel like it's then becoming to that bigger realm where it's just a cultural happening. Right. You know what I mean? I feel like that's where it's kind of gotten to that level now.
Yes.
I'm a little bit. I still think it could be Pacquiao Mayweather or Mayweather Pacquiao, whatever. The only hesitancy I have about this one is that it hasn't crossed what I would call the believability threshold, which is inside MMA. I mean, every YouTube comment, 49-1. You know, it's like, all right, guys, for crying out loud. But
yes.
And look, maybe he does it. We'll see on August 26th. But my point being is, there's still this mainstream fascination with what Conor's able to do. The bit yesterday about, you know, why do you have a school bag you can't even read? I saw this on Pablo Torre, one of my favorite ESPN reporters, was tweeting all this stuff. So that's exactly what you're talking about. But are those same people now being like, this guy might have a chance? There's still that lack of crossover in that sense.
I feel like that's where what's closing.
Okay, so then let me ask you this.
Okay, I feel like that's what I'm saying is I feel like his belief, whatever it is, he's presenting himself as somebody who, you know, could be, you know, like he belongs, not only belongs there, but he's actually deigning to do the fight. You know, it's like that's how he's presenting himself.
4th round knockout. Like he's not only just saying, I'm gonna win. He's actually saying the same way he says it about Aldo and the same way he says it about Eddie Alvarez. He's doing that same thing until you're like,
he's planting all those little markers we talked about where he's starting to say like his movements a little bit. He's like he's already starting in on that.
Size of his head.
Yeah, size of his head.
Frail body.
I thought the one with Senior was the most instructive one. Not about what he said to Senior about Senior, but it was like, your boy, he got greedy. This is the moment. He should have stayed retired.
Yeah,
so
that
this
was
is
good.
so this that told you what is McGregor's core fundamental insight. His fundamental insight is that he believes. What have we always said about Mayweather? This is what I mean. These two guys are the same. Yeah. He gets a guy like Canelo a little before he's really matured. He gets a guy like Cotto a little bit off prime. I think in Mayweather's mind, he's getting a guy who he thinks is easy, and I think in McGregor's mind, McGregor's getting a guy who's a little bit off prime as well.
And there is the essence of this fight. You know,
and it's two guys who are the best in the world at this, trying to exact their vision.
Do you now believe Conor has a greater chance than you did 3 days ago?
3 days ago? No.
Before this started?
No.
Nothing's changed.
Look, here's what I'm saying.
This is the first time we hear him speak, right?
My opinion on this will not change. If what we think about the world is, if what we think we know about the world is true, I don't think he has a chance. But again, what is McGregor's best asset? It is undermining doubt about his upside. Yeah. That's his very core fundamental skill. So let's see what he can do.
You can tell lies. If you say it with if you say it with authority, 80% of the people are going to believe it. You know what I'm saying? And he's one of those guys who's doing that. He's anybody who has no idea really what they're looking at, but they know it's a culture happening, so they're tuning in to see, are just going to see that. They're going to see that Conor McGregor is, you know, holding himself in such a way that they're going to believe, and I feel like that's right. Like, well, that's why I'm saying, like, the believability is starting to broaden. Like, I think people are just seeing it. It comes from all those sectors, basically, of people who really don't follow it. But I think even some of the people who do follow the sports on one way or another, I think there's a little bit of, you know, they're getting more wiggle room in there.
I'm starting to see less jokes about the fight.
Because it started off. Look where it started off.
Yes, I'm starting to see less people saying, like, he's not going to land the punch. I'm starting to see more people, like, grabbing the popcorn.
Max Kellerman, he might have to...
Is he still going? I have not seen him.
I have not. This is my point. He's not really talking about it.
Well, okay.
You're right. It's closing, but there's still some, and there's a month left, but there's still some work to be done about that.
I think even the 2 days that are left in this, I think, you know, to some extent, I feel like I've seen all I need to see on this tour. I've seen.
No, are you kidding?
For me, I've seen it. But I think that the value of today in Brooklyn and tomorrow in London is the other ones kind of ran up against, you know, home run derby, all-star game. There's certainly a lot of interest.
Derby. Are you kidding?
That was a good derby.
This is the fight of our lives.
Aaron Judge.
Yeah, that stuff was
guys hitting balls into
the larger sports world. The larger sports world is more interested in that stuff than this, and this is still somewhat being looked at as like a sideshow. But I think we still have a couple more days. We'll see what happens in these couple days, and then of course when fight week happens, the interest will be there. But I will say, you know, if you ask Luke if he believes now 2 days in whether, you know, he has more belief in McGregor, I would say that I certainly don't, because he hasn't gotten into Mayweather's head as a competitor. As a promoter, yes, but as a competitor, there's not been even one glimmer of, you know, Jose Aldo on that stage. We have not seen anything where we're not going to see Floyd come racing across the ring after him. We're going to see Floyd, you know, I'm still figuring that Floyd's going to do his 12 rounds of you know, shoulder roll, and Conor's going to have a hard time touching him.
Let me give a shout out, if I can, to SB Nation's own Scott Christ, who runs I think one of the best boxing sites that is out there, but certainly one in the company, badlefthook.com. He is one of the few boxing writers. I don't think he exactly thinks that McGregor's going to win, but if you read the way he writes, it is probably the most fair boxing coverage you're going to get. It's very down the line. He takes McGregor seriously. Remember I said previously in the show, these boxing writers, they don't know who McGregor is. There's still a little bit of that gap. Now, Scott, I think, has got it right, but here's what I'm looking for. When the boxing writers start to say, okay, look, we think Floyd's going to win, but we are intrigued. There is something to this. We want to see that. And I don't think that screw has turned yet.
It boggles my mind that there are boxing media who are ignoring this, and I've gone on some of their Twitter feeds. And
well, this is why boxing media, like,
sport,
just from an SEO standpoint, what are you doing?
Your sport is leading Sports Center. Everyone's talking about, like, this morning in Toronto at the airport, those two guys squaring off on the cover, the front page of all the papers, the tabloids and, you know, the traditional ones, if you want to call it that. And it's like, this is still your sport. For better or worse, like, you are taking a stand against what?
Yeah,
this is still a boxing match.
This is the other point about this.
You still have to cover it.
Okay, I agree that they're in.
Like, we didn't boycott when James Toney came to the UFC.
Well, first of all, this is just better for us. MMA fighting has been crushing the coverage. So, like, thanks, guys. But the other part is that you do have to remember this. And you might, I'm telling you, if Floyd goes and does what most people think Floyd is going to do, which is the same thing he always does, bore us to death and take an easy decision, you're going to feel like I have felt a couple times that, God damn it, he conned us again. The boxing media, pardon my language, is sick of his shit. They are sick of showing up to his events, and Floyd, more than almost anyone, presents a completely false image about everyone's chances, and everything just feels so artificial, and he goes and does exactly what he always does, collects a giant check, and then everyone goes on their way, and I think they're tired of this.
Do you wonder, though, like, one of the selling points for Conor McGregor is he's kind of, this is where he's already putting, like, chess pieces in place, and he's saying, you know, guys respected him too much, they'd shy away, and he's saying, like, I'm not going to shy away. In other words, it's almost like he's saying, like, he doesn't believe he can be knocked out by him in the, you know, in his entrances and things like that, which to me is intriguing because you know he means it on some level. You know he's going to do that. 100%. That's what's fun about it. You know he's going to go in there and try to take his head off. And, like, if you watch, I went back and looked at some old Floyd fights and stuff. Not a lot of guys, you know, it's very, very, very technical. I mean, they're not trying to go in there and take his head off in most cases. They're trying to nickel and dime and get, you know, find openings and all that stuff. There is a part of me that's turning a little bit like, how will this look? Even from a boxing side of you, like, how will this look? Because you have a guy who's going to go challenge him. Yeah. He's going to try to do it. He's going to try to knock him out.
Also, isn't it a bit foolish on our end? We've seen Conor, right? And he's done the impossible. He knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. The Mystic Mac thing is kind of a joke, but, like, the guy, I mean...
kind of, though. We can't say it definitively.
Well, his percentage, like, his prediction percentage is pretty damn good. Like, at this point, to completely dismiss him, like, I'm sorry, when he's talking about, I'm going to do this and that, I can't say that he's a liar. I can't call him a liar because everything that he has said...
pointed this out a lot of times, 100%.
Right?
That's part of what goes into it.
I feel like it's foolish to dismiss it.
Well, and also, look, if you want to, I mean, in my opinion, about the competitiveness hasn't necessarily changed, but one thing I think has been illuminated this week, if you want to be fair, you got to see him face to face. Conor is significantly bigger. This is something that literally will have an impact. Now, if you're a Mayweather fan, you'll say, well, Floyd will be smaller, more agile, and won't tax himself out with the size. But point being is you can see them right up there, and Conor is clearly the bigger guy. And also, Conor is about the best starter in the game. Like, when the first, you know, let's fight goes, he's ready to go. Floyd is very, I mean, he's defensive generally. He is defensive especially in the first 4 rounds. So to me, watching Conor against Floyd in those first 4 rounds is going to be kind of interesting. I just feel like if we're at, let's say, round 8 or 9, it's hard to imagine a scenario where you got to box him at that point.
Have you guys noticed that the MMA community, like, Conor is a very polarizing figure at times. You know, people, when he fights Nate Diaz, they're going to pick a side and they don't like certain things that he does or says. But have you started to notice that the MMA community is kind of rallying around him and, like, this is our guy and we want you to be the guy to knock off, you know, the despicable Floyd Mayweather? That's the sense that even the ones who probably would root against him if he fought, say, a Frankie Edgar, it seems like it's become MMA versus boxing.
Oh, do you remember, you know, I know Randy Couture is a different animal and much more universally popular, But being a TD Garden when Randy Couture fought against James Toney, they came out of their corners and the immediate chant was UFC, UFC,
Yesterday
UFC,
too.
right? I mean, it was all about that, and so people. That's what they care about. That's, you know, and the crowd at the two events you've been to, and I'm sure the crowd at the one today will, you know, what if you were to, I know it was like 95% Conor and about 5% Floyd, it seemed like the crowd, at least in terms of noise, and I'm sure that's going to, it's going to probably be 99% in London, if not 99.9%. And so, yeah, the MMA community, if you want to call it a community, has come out on this, and this is their guy. This is the guy who's you know, going to shut up all the old, you know, boxing people who just like look at this sport.
Storyline.
It underscores. We talked about it before, but this really puts it in stark relief. It shows the distance between the two communities. MMA and Jiu-Jitsu are integrated communities. Can you imagine when Luke Rockhold and Benson Henderson, when he was still with the UFC, went to compete in the Mundials? And people show up to like the Long Beach Convention Center and be like, UFC. No one's going to do that because these are together communities. Boxing and MMA are not together communities, and I feel like MMA fans want to let that be known. Boxing is sort of more like we don't care at this point. I guess we'll see how it goes, but these are very distinct groups.
So many interesting little things, like you see like the UFC PR people dealing with the Showtime and the Mayweather PR people and how they're doing things differently. And again, some of the boxing media has been showing up and comparing it to how, you know, we do things in the press conferences. Like it's like these two, it's like a forced marriage, right? And they have to play nice, and then, you know, hopefully it explodes in a good way come August 26th. I do believe, by the way, I do feel now, I would be surprised if this does less than the 4 million. I think it will do more. I think it will continue to build. And the short time period in which this all happened, I think helps it.
It's fun watching MMA fans have to kind of digest how boxing events are run. This is the part of the, the sub thing going on because there's all these people on the stage, there's all this confusion, there's these entourages and stuff, and I feel like most MMA fans are sort of like, what is going on? It just seems so busy at all times. I saw somebody post a picture of Hieronymus Bosch, like one of his crazy, you know, so much going on. It sort of is like that. You look at the stage at any given time and there's 60 guys up there, all different players, and, you know, boxing events sometimes after the fight, there's 100 people in that ring. It's just, boxing is just so different, and it's kind of cool in one sense because the MMA world that absolutely excludes boxing now has to look into this world. You know what I mean? And that can't. I feel like that actually helps on some level. You know what I mean? To pay attention to a sport that they wouldn't do normally.
In Los Angeles, to me, there was a feeling like Conor was like a little bit wide-eyed. Like, this is nuts that we actually made it here. And you look at the
first
stage,
words out of his mouth.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. You look at the stage, and it was 10-1 in favor of Mayweather's people. I mean, Conor, I saw Dana White there, I saw Adi Attar, his manager, and that was pretty much it, maybe a bodyguard or two. Yesterday, you start to see Artem Lobov and Owen, but the entourages, I mean, Floyd is winning that battle. Floyd's entourage is
got
like
a lot of practice.
100 to 1.
You see that picture of Esther Lynn going up the escalator with it, like Mayweather's team going down the escalator. She's the only one out there, and there's like 40 guys streaming down.
And you kind of see, there's this feeling, it's like, it feels like a turf war. You go to the press conference, and you'll experience this later today, and there's all these guys wearing TMT stuff, and you're kind of like, okay, what's going on here? And look, they're like, the majority of them are African American, and the majority of Conor's fans are white, and you don't know what's going on. And I've seen some people start to bring up, and I don't know how you feel about this, that Conor's, you know, skirting the line racially, saying dance boy and things like that. Mark Ramundi and Casey taught me all about this. I didn't know that there were any sort of racial undertones to this. Do you feel like he is playing a dangerous game here? Do you feel like anything has been, has anything crossed the line?
No,
whether it's racially or talking about women or anything like that?
No, I don't think anything's crossed the line.
Okay.
Man. I don't think so. Whatever he said it 2 days in a row.
There was an article in the New York Post about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he could exercise a little bit more discretion.
Check the source. The New York Post is not
I know. Well, it's like, I mean, fake news central. But the point being is, look,
is that Mark Ramundi from? No, go ahead.
Case in point. No, my point is, look, I don't think he meant anything racial by it. And in fact, they asked.
Neither did I. I didn't even know.
Did I. And if they asked Floyd Sr., even Floyd Sr. was like, no, I don't think so.
Great point.
But look, I mean, Conor is smart. He knows what the line is. He wants to go right up to it.
That's
you know?
exactly the thing.
The line
and he
always
switches
changes.
it. Dance for Me, Son. It's almost like he realized, like, well, that probably didn't sound just the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, but he did Dance for Me Boy yesterday.
Oh, did he really?
But one time.
The line is forever moving closer to anything that anybody says about anything. So when you ask if he's crossed the line, of course, everybody crosses the line by opening their mouth and saying any words. So I think at a certain point you just have to say, you know, I'm not going to worry about that stuff. I mean, Yeah, there are things that they could say, and believe me, you know, McGregor has a lot more ammo if he wants to use it. I keep seeing online people saying, well, maybe they made an agreement to not talk about Floyd's domestic violence, and I don't know. I mean, I would hate to think that were the case. I know that Floyd's domestic violence. Floyd's domestic violence convictions got edited out of my Washington Post story, but I then tweeted it out anyway. So,
what do you mean? Please explain.
I wrote that that one of the things that Conor was going to do, or one of the things he was going to try to do was get into Floyd's head, and one of the ways to do that would be to hammer home all about his multiple domestic violence convictions. And somebody called me out on that on Twitter and said, "How come you just said Floyd's domestic violence accusations?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I went and saw the story, and my editor had changed it to accusations.
The entire reference wasn't taken out; it was altered.
Well, it was changed.
Yes,
it was changed to because the guy's been convicted 4 times. And so I went back at, you know, whatever. I went back and that was not a very fruitful conversation on my part. Let's just say. You know, so this is a real hot button issue, and Floyd. I don't know whether it would even bother him. I really don't think that he has. I don't think that he. You know, I think he probably.
You think that guy has remorse?
Exactly. That's.
No. I'm not saying. I was just wondering if there was anything from afar that you guys thought was like, this is getting a little too much.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know about you guys. The taste may vary. I like a good zinger. You know, why do you have a book bag you can't even read? I was just like, But, you know, when they're like, you're a bitch, no, you're a bitch, it's like, it gets a little to that Kiesa Lee territory. Don't you talk about my mama.
But a punch was thrown. A punch was thrown.
I don't know.
There could be none here.
And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me like Conor McGregor, yes, he's very audacious and he'll say some stuff, but there's still an integrity in place with him pretty much at all times. I feel like there's certain lines he won't cross. I don't even know if he'll... It'll be interesting to see if he actually does that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, his jokes,
I mean, he's had low-hanging fruit before,
all the stuff with Aldo, I'm going to go into the favela.
Well, that
was a little bit. He's over the top. But for example, I think Chuck's onto something because isn't Floyd's daughter up on stage at all times? Floyd's little daughter.
I don't know.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people up there.
Well, okay. There's like the entire Mayweather family's up there.
Yes.
But I believe his daughter's up there. He doesn't say anything about her. You know what I mean? I think he's got a little bit of.
I think so too.
Chivalry or nobility about it.
There is something about it, and we see it come out mostly after his fights because he becomes he's no longer the competitor. He's just the guy who plays the sport. But I don't know. All I'm saying is it'd be interesting to see if he actually does that because I could see a scenario where he doesn't at all. Like he just maybe that's just the type of thing he won't attack.
It doesn't seem like it would. I think to Luke's point, I think it's not really going to affect. I thought it would affect Floyd. That was my initial thought. You go at him for this because let's put it this way: if I had been convicted of something like that, and someone then sort of called me out on it, I would feel horrible. But I just don't think that Floyd is the same animal. I think Floyd is a guy who doesn't give a damn. The fact that he did it enough times to be convicted 4 different times tells you maybe he's not really. He's one of those guys, one of those 5 times drunk driver kind of people who you think that if that happened once. You wouldn't do it again? Well, this guy just did it at least 4 times.
Floyd went to jail for domestic violence, kicked out 2 reporters who had the temerity to talk about it, 2 female reporters, retires for 2 years, and comes back and opens up a strip club called Girl Collection, which is both objectifying and in some ways the grossest thing I've ever heard.
He even plugged it during
his entire Instagram feed is him and Davis, one of his boxers, just watching strippers' booty shake in front of him. Over and over and over again. This is, I mean, like the notion that he would care about this. Now, John Kavanaugh tweeted about it. That was kind of noteworthy. But like, people are like, you're a convicted woman beater. He's like, that's just who Mayweather is, unfortunately.
It's been fun to see Conor sort of understand what this means historically. Shout out to our colleague Josh Gross. He mentions the Ali Inoki fight. He mentions the James Toney. We've talked about this with Conor. He's a great student of combat sports, and he understands what this all means. And so thus far, I think it's been a home run.
Yeah.
And
he's
really
also he's a student of like basically human psyche. He knows where things are at. He knows the feeling of what's going on around him at all times.
Yeah, it really has been fascinating. And again, the word theater to me is like they come up and one guy talks to the other, and that seems somewhat choreographed, but I don't know. I want to come up to you because I know you're for sure going. You guys are sort of on the fence at around 9 p.m. Eastern time today, and I feel like you are going to have a different feeling on all of this. I don't even know what time zone I'm in, for God's sake. No, I know. But you feel a certain way, it's going to go to a whole other level of experiencing it. And by the way, this is my camera. If you are in the New York City area and you are on the fence about going to this, trust me when I say you will regret it if you don't go. You will enjoy this immensely. It is one of the most fun experiences that I've ever personally been a part of as far as covering combat sports. Now, there are a bunch of other things we need to talk about before we say goodbye. And the big news this week, it feels like it happened, 40 months ago, but Gegard Mousasi signed with Bellator.
You've been traveling all over the place.
Gegard Mousasi signed with Bellator, and this is notable. Gegard Mousasi is on a 5-fight winning streak. Gegard Mousasi was at worst 1 win away from fighting for a UFC title. Gegard Mousasi has been coming into his own as a fighter and a personality. There is a cult-like following surrounding him. Are you surprised that the UFC let this man walk?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit if we thought he would, and I was like, I can't see a scenario where they would let that happen, but here we are. To me, Gegard Mousasi, like that's, especially in that division, with the kind of what's been going on, he was this a fairly key figure, just to where he was at, where he'd placed himself, and 4 finishes in a row as well in that streak. I mean, usually when we're talking about guys that maybe they let go who are on a winning streak, it's because their style is a little bit questionable to taste or something like that. But he is none of that. He's a great fighter, like you said. His personality is finally taken on. Yeah. I feel like people understand him, his dry humor and all this, and he's also stopped giving, he doesn't care as much as how he comes across.
Giving an F?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't want to.
Who wants to see women fight?
Yeah, yes, I know, exactly. Stuff like that.
Well, I was like, Gegard, please, we're doing so well here. Why did you have to go there?
Well, that's just him, right? He's like, but, besides that, I mean, he's translating very well. This is by far the biggest Bellator. Like, this is the biggest defection so far where a Bellator.
Interesting. So bigger than Rory?
I think so. I mean,
bigger
because
than Ryan Bader
Rory, there was still a little bit, I think, for people who, because he had lost the fights, even though you could break those fights down and be like, given his nose and everything else. I felt like there was we don't know if he's what he has. We don't know anymore.
But are there 2 ways of looking at this in the sense that, is it big from a sports standpoint, but, Gegard Mousasi's debut won't outdraw, Kimbo Slice, right? So, like, from a sporting standpoint, this is a huge coup, but he's maybe not the draw that some of the other signings
Yeah, but every single time the Bellator pulls one of these things off, every time they add one more guy, like, after this signing, I thought, God, they're really filling their roster. So then I thought, well, let me go look at some, some rankings. And I'm looking at different outlets' rankings, and I'm like, well, yeah, they're doing some great stuff, but still, like, the top 10 of every single weight class, 8 or 9 of those guys are UFC fighters. So it is, we're talking like incremental progress, but just about every weight class, there's 1 or 2 guys that are, in that top 10 quality in Bellator now, and that wasn't the case a year ago. That wasn't the case less than a year ago. So they're making progress. I mean, is the UFC's, mountaintop home about to be ransacked and they're going to get kicked out? I don't think that's the case, but I think Bellator is becoming a player in not just that spectacle Kimbo way,
of course,
but in a real serious competitive way, and they're going to be able to use both of those ends to become a bigger player because they're going to have those kind of the older fighter fights are going to still be there. They're going to draw a lot of eyes, and they're going to have these other guys who are contenders. I think they're doing pretty well for themselves.
Bellator is trying to, and I think quite successfully at this point, with a signing like this, it is not a place for UFC rejects. Right? Gegard Mousasi is one of the best middleweights in the world, 5-fight win streak, just beat the former champion, somewhat controversially, of course, but didn't look bad. And, he makes a lot of points about, he's only 31, had a lot of surgeries when he first came to UFC and had a bit of a rough go, but really hit his groove.
If he doesn't get caught by Uriah Hall in that first fight, you would have a streak of years.
Amazing. And of course, redeemed himself in that particular setting as well. So, to me, this is not a place for UFC rejects. This is a place for, it's interesting though, UFC still has not exercised matching rights since 2014. They didn't want to match whatever Bellator was offering. But to me, the big question here, not the biggest question, but the sort of effects of this is, one, it still is not a game changer in terms of who has all the talent, still UFC.
Of course.
And the other thing you have to remember as a Bellator fan, the blessing of this is now that there is another guy in Bellator, there's some competition, and guys are going to get paid more what they want, but a guy like that means they're going to have more pay-per-views in Bellator, because you can't afford to put a guy like that on free TV very often.
Sure, that is actually a very good point. I also feel like there's this feeling every time someone makes the leap from from the UFC to Bellator, it's always like, the shackles are off, right? They say, Reebok deal, I hate it. Like, now you start to get their feelings on everything.
Right.
Ryan Bader talking about the win bonuses. So that's just a very fascinating aspect to all of this. Like, you almost get them unfiltered once they finally are free and are so happy.
How much people are stifling.
Yeah. And earlier today, we broke the news that Joseph Duffy has agreed to remain with the UFC, signs a 7-fight deal, and I think that's a good signing for the UFC, and I think it's important that they don't let all the free agents, because not everyone is actually like playing out their contract. I still don't understand why you would sign a 7-fight deal. That seems a little excessive in this day and age. But yeah, I think what's also interesting about Gegard is that he comes out and he's like, yeah, maybe I'll fight Rory and maybe I'll fight this guy. It all of a sudden feels like, okay, you can go to Bellator and
options. You
can play with your toys a little more.
That's what's fun about it, is there are more options. Even with the whole Chael Sonnen, you know, kind of given that, which was great, by the way, when he was talking about what happened with
the
Rory.
Apple story.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you just have more options. And I think that that's really where Strikeforce was at before the whole thing. They had that. They had just enough combinations to make it interesting. And I feel like now Bellator has that too, including some of the guys that have been with Bellator now get into that mix too.
What's interesting to think about is like that Reebok deal and, let's say, health insurance, or the accidental health insurance that they offer. These are things that really service somebody who's making 20 and 20, right? But at some point, when you're a star, Ryan Bader doesn't care that he lost accident insurance. Gegard Mousasi doesn't care that he doesn't have the Reebok deal anymore. In fact, they feel like, and also the other big key, all money up front. No show win nonsense. He gets all his money up front.
Yeah, they're changing the paradigm.
Right. So this point, when the UFC says we have this Reebok deal, you have to chase down sponsors, we have accident insurance, these are really beneficial things. But at some point, you graduate to a level in the game where that's not really much of a bargaining chip anymore.
Okay, as we run out of time here, let me quickly bring up UFC 213. That also feels like it happened, you know.
It's a shame, too, because that was like such a great fight.
I had never heard of sinusitis.
Yes. Well, okay, so let's talk about Amanda Nunes first. Of course, we know the story. She has the fight camp. She makes it to fight week. She cuts the weight. She makes the weight. She makes it to fight day. And then hours before, she pulls out. And she says that she had this issue, sinusitis, which... Great job by our Casey Leiden finding a video of her talking about it back in December, so we know it's not some BS story that she made up. Valentina Shevchenko doesn't end up fighting, of course. Joanna Jędrzejczyk tried to fight her, classic move, great PR. The fight doesn't happen, of course, but it was, I think, a very savvy move on Joanna and her team's part. And they're trying to rebook that fight, the Nunes-Shevchenko fight, the rematch for Edmonton. But I think the most interesting part about this was how the UFC, and in particular Dana White, handled it, completely not backing his champion. Was this a mistake? Did he handle it the wrong way? Or can we say, okay, look, you know, there's a lot of money here. We sold tickets. There's refunds. You have a right to be upset. I don't know if you heard Chael Sonnen on my show, but he's like, look, the promoter should be upset here, and she should be stripped of the belt. You didn't show up. You should forfeit. Where do we fall as far as this discussion is concerned?
I don't know what I mean, can't you be upset and not be a bad promoter at the same time? Like, why are you burying her? So it feels good at 213 to be like, hey guys, I did everything I could. She was medically cleared for whatever that's worth, which is a separate debate altogether. She didn't show up. That's where you point the blame. Okay, all right, fair enough. You deflect from your promoter responsibilities. But you have to make that fight again. So now at 215, you have to go with a person you've now told everyone is unreliable.
It's like the DJ thing all over again,
it's
right?
Like it's like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. So I understand where you can be like, oh, I'm so. I understand why the UFC doesn't want to accept blame because look, they're ultimately independent contractors. They're saying, hey, that's on them. But ultimately, you're not servicing yourself in the end. So
it's not like Dana to be vindictive. So I thought this was out of now.
Yeah.
They, I just think that that's one of those situations where there's no logical reason why he would present it that way other than some petty vindictive nature. It's his nature to do that. It's his nature to go on there and to do that. And I mean, you know, we sit around like, why would you do that? Because you see it logical, but he sees it very myopically. He sees it as what's happening in the moment, you know, and he'll deal with it later. Like that's how he's always dealt with it. Now, I agree 100% though that, you know, you can understand why a promotion would be upset. That was the first thing. It was hard because you see all these people, you know, everybody, when these things happen, you see a lot of people, they want to automatically side with the fighter without even knowing yet what the reasoning was. There was plenty of people siding with the fighter. I was sitting there like, I could see why the UFC was upset. I was like, this is crazy on fight day, and you know, if she's really truly medically cleared, you know, all the stuff, you're like, this makes sense that they're upset. But I completely disagree with him going and blowing her up. It just makes no sense. I don't see how it benefits them. You know, like you said, they're going to have to make the fight again. But you become immune to the illogical things that he does at some point. I really believe that. I've said this before. There is a point in time where I'm like, why are people surprised that he's doing this? He's done this so often. Almost like the fighters need to take him. You know, even though he's the public face, he's losing some of that gravity. I feel like a lot of what he's been, you know, there's just so much that goes into that. But I feel like the Dana White as the definitive guy, maybe for the mainstream media, but everything below, everything within the niche, it is already tarnished. I feel like people don't even really listen to him anymore.
Right, absolutely. I feel bad for those people who spent $1,000 or more to fly to Vegas and buy tickets and all that stuff. I feel bad for those people who planned to be there, the fans. They got screwed here, absolutely. But I also understand where Amanda Nunes is coming from, or anybody who is wearing a championship belt. You notice these things happen with, you know, Dana White gets into big shit fights with his champions because his champions, there's something that is very different between being a champion and not being a champion.
What is he
in terms of your economics?
A coward or something? I don't know what he's calling her.
If you were the champ, Amanda Nunes goes out there that night at whatever percent she could have gone out there, and she loses. Her economic situation is dramatically changed.
There's a massive fall from the top, right?
Let's go way back to when John Jones decided not to take the short notice Chael Sonnen fight, and he got blown up by Dana White. I know that John Jones did a lot of things after that where he deserves to get blown up, but that was totally legitimate. For John Jones, he was the champion, and he had nothing to. Of course, he's going to win his show and win money, but in terms of the big picture, his championship is gold. That is really an important thing economically for these guys. And Amanda Nunes could have lost all of that. Instead, she says, I'm going to take care of myself. And until the UFC or the sport restructures things in such a way that it makes it economically feasible for a fighter to fight when they're not 100% or when they've got some kind of thing going on, you can't expect them to do it. So I don't really feel as much for the promoter. I do feel for the people, the fans who showed up.
I mean, look, everybody lost. Amanda lost, she didn't get paid. Valentina got a portion of what she was supposed to get paid, but didn't even get a chance to compete for a title, which was stuck in her craw. UFC lost, fans lost. I mean, who won? Nobody won, right? So in that sense, it kind of sucked. But the thing for me is that forfeit clause you mentioned. I know Chael Sonnen brought this up. I don't know exactly the particulars of what theory he was proffering, or there could be a variety of different ways you enact a forfeit clause. I think it's a bad idea because this medical clearance, we've had guys like Luke Rockhold, yeah, I fought with staph. Yeah. Like, how good is your medical clearance if you can fight with staph infection? Not great, right? So you don't want guys who have a financial need to make even worse medical decisions based on, if you don't take it, it's an L. You're going to lose. We think it might get people to jump at an opportunity, and instead I think it'll force financially challenged fighters into desperate
situations. Show me the proof. Yeah. Show me the proof that she was medically cleared. Who's this doctor that cleared her? You know, I think Amanda Nunes.
You're not suggesting Dana White would.
But I think Amanda Nunes deserves a little bit more respect than that. I mean, holy smokes, this person has fought a who's who. She's never had an incident before. It boggles the mind to treat your champion like that. And
I saw somebody on Twitter being like, "So you pulled out of this fight for a stuffy nose?"
Yeah,
and I'm thinking to myself,
a lot of people those types of comments.
I'm thinking to myself, how can you think a person prize fights for a living at this level?
To go through a fight week and a fight.
To go through 1 day of training.
Yes, and
one day of training.
I would say her coaches, right? She lost money on all this.
Yeah.
But people were saying to me like, this is unprecedented. You know, to pull out. Guys, go back to February. Go back to February. And look at how Scott Coker dealt with Matt Mitrione pulling out. And I can make a very strong case that Mitrione pulling out of that fight against Fedor was more impactful financially to that market than Amanda Nunes pulling out of the Shevchenko fight in Las Vegas. Coker went up there and said, essentially, crap happens, we're going to rebook it, we're sorry, what can we do? The guy's not feeling well. What's wrong with doing that?
But Nunes ended the career of Dana's favorite.
There is something,
right?
I mean it goes back to the Cyborg Beat.
You know, that was her last fight, right?
You think I actually hadn't even thought about that.
Ended the career of Dana White's absolute, not just cash cow, but also the person he loved the most in this sport.
Miesha Tate?
Guys, one last thing before we go. I just want to ask you about this because it was a hot topic. Did Michael Bisping cross the line when he ripped the Cuban flag? And did Yoel Romero cross the line when he burnt the picture of Michael Bisping holding the flag? Two wrongs don't make a right, we know. But did you feel uneasy? I mean, Romero's response to the question is, I mean, I'm still kind of shaken up over the stare, but do you feel like that was a little too much?
Bandera?
I do. I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. I understand that people burn flags for political protests and all that stuff, but when you're just doing this to irritate a guy who's fighting, first of all, I don't like the idea of heckling a guy. If you're a fighter, heckling the guy who's competing in there, that sort of bugs me. First of all, but then to do that sort of bugs me. But you know, then we see, you know, Yoel's like very, very soft-spoken response, and you know, in the press conference afterward when he was talking to you about how this was such a horrible thing, and then he goes and does a video where he does basically the same thing. I mean, come on, Yoel. I mean,
see you soon, boy.
I mean, if you want to take a photograph of Bisping and burn that, but don't burn a picture of him holding his flag. It was like, you know.
I never liked that sort of thing because, I mean, you know, it's a country, you know. It's like the guy just happens to be a you know, representative of the country, but it just doesn't make sense. It's an ultimate bad guy kind of move.
It is, and I mean that's straight out of 1980s pro wrestling.
Of course,
you know, like the only thing that was missing from the Yoel video, and he doesn't lean this way, but like him wearing a Fidel hat, right? Like there was Cuban liquor. He was smoking a Cuban cigar. It was like it was like a cartoon of like a Cuban.
Or Che Guevara shirt.
In a loss, he came out of that probably in a bigger sense than he has in any of his wins. And that whole thing happened, and then the press conference and just the way he came off. It's pretty funny how sometimes this happens. And suddenly you want to see the fight more.
Yeah, I know.
Even though he lost, it's like
I know.
I want to see it more.
Forget it. Just give Whitaker somebody else. You know. I actually, again, I don't have a problem with I mean, I would never, ever do something like what either of them did. I could never bring myself to rip a flag or burn a picture with the guy. I mean, I could never, ever do that. But I really have a hard time policing behavior like that. I'm hesitant to do it. I actually thought something was kind of instructive. Danny Segura did something kind of interesting. It's less about can we police these guys, but more how the UFC handled it. And you know, look, they're dealing with this in real time too. So it's hard to know what the right answer is. But I thought he made a good point. You know. He tweeted that he retweeted the UFC. The UFC put a video up of I think Bisping ripping it and like a smiley face emoji, like laughing, crying, laughing.
UFC European account.
Yeah, and he retweeted it and being like, would they do this if someone ripped up the American flag?
Yeah.
I don't think that they would. And so it certainly puts the UFC in a compromising position. But I thought it was interesting to say. It's easy, I think, for some fans to be like, Cuba, who cares, you know? But Danny, a Latino. Didn't quite see it that way, and actually showed it to my wife, and then I showed my wife the one of Romero burning the thing, and she said, "Good for Yoel Romero to burn it."
Really?
Yeah, she was actually happy about it. So I'm not saying either of them speak for all Latinos. I'm merely saying part of your opinion about this and the way in which you observe it is going to be a function of what part of the world you come from and how that is treated to a larger audience.
I will say this, and I don't condone disrespecting flags. And I thought Yoel's response was a little softer because Bisping was in the picture. But I will say this: I really want to see that fight now. Like, I really want to see that fight.
It's almost like, you know? It's like, do you really have to fight for the title?
Yeah, this is my human emotion. This is my feeling after seeing all that. Like, I really want to see those guys square off.
Or Robert Whitaker. He has the best performance of his life. Gets to go two guys, and then we're trying to make another match.
Also, like, don't you feel like that fight is more competitive?
I do.
Like,
oh, yes.
Yoel's this monster, but if you can last a little bit, you can tell after 3 rounds he's got some issues. If nothing else, Michael Bisping's perseverant.
Yes.
I think Robert Whitaker is like better at Bisping than just about everything. So to me, that's actually kind of a better fight.
I was actually thinking that like come the 4th, 5th round of that fight on Saturday, of course, Robert Whitaker became the interim champion. I was trying to look at Bisping, and I kind of felt this air go out, like, you know, this isn't so bad after all if I have to face this guy. You know, not to suggest that he was trying to avoid him. I know he was trying to get the money fight. And by the way, I still wouldn't count out GSP and Bisping at this point.
Really?
I still wouldn't. Absolutely not.
Wow. These guys. I thought someone said that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And Amanda Nunes won't headline again and blah, blah, blah. But come on.
There's a lot of subtweeting passive aggressive.
No, he keeps bringing it up. I'm trying to.
You're taking the high road.
A lot of passive aggressiveness.
I try to think that.
You don't have issues with Dana too, do you?
No. It's been a great week. I appreciate Jeff fighting my battle. But yes.
Don't mess with my boy Ariel. Don't mess with my boy Ariel.
You know one thing, that's the 3rd year in a row in International Fight Week, right?
Yes.
Where something kind of disastrous has happened close to the fight. Last year there was a couple things coming out of it and going in. I will say this, like we badmouth the UFC a lot when they're doing this, but their production crew to change and do everything that they do is pretty remarkable, man. I saw like how much they like posting those signs, even having to go through that whole process. Everybody behind the scenes, their whole promo packages and everything else. It's pretty amazing. It is what those guys do.
That was impressive.
Very quickly, Brian Stan commentating on Friday night, doing it again on Saturday, a completely different crew each time. Folks don't realize that's 14 hours of commentary, and he didn't miss a beat. I don't know if there's another commentator in sports who can.
The second fight of the night, it was on Fight Pass, and I'm watching it, and I forgot who it was. It was a guy I'd never seen before, I never heard of before. And there's Brian Stan talking about, well, I've been watching this guy's boxing clips. I'm like, does this guy ever sleep? Does he ever sleep?
He's ridiculous.
No, he is prolific, and honestly, someone made a joke to me that it was more International Fight Week, W-E-A-K, and there is
passive aggressive.
There is a case to be made there, but I will actually say there were a ton of great stories. I mean, we didn't have time to talk about Justin Gaethje's amazing debut, and of course Jesse Taylor winning tough 25. I mean,
Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
One of the better weekends.
The return of Anthony Pettis. You know, there were some really great stories.
The two main events. Because that's what you remember coming out of it. Were both great. So they had a great
Fight
weekend.
of the year contender, round of the year, all that and more. All right, the countdown is on to Brooklyn. Hi, on this camera.
Getting the palpitations now, Ariel.
We are, 2 hours away from doors opening, and there's going to be all kinds of stuff.
Jesus Christ, really?
Let's get out of here.
2 hours away, 4 p.m., and then at 6 p.m. Eastern, I do believe it all starts. It's either 6 or 7.
I think it's 7, actually.
Okay, so it's 7. So maybe we're 3 hours away. Again, I don't know where I am.
But when's Conor going to show up?
I'm happy that I'm here. No, he's actually been on time. He's been the one to arrive first. So
Not this time, though.
the times they are changing. Oh, you're expecting a new wrinkle. See? This is exciting.
Yeah, the news, come on.
This is fun.
Floyd made him wait yesterday, right?
Get on board. Enjoy the ride.
Yeah, Floyd
Stop
made him
being
wait.
such a cynic.
Oh, come on.
All right.
It's a good show.
We shall say goodbye for now. Hope you're enjoying the coverage this week from the World Tour. Back next week to wrap that whole thing up. And by the way, it's a very busy weekend in MMA as far as actual fighting is concerned. There's Bellator on Friday, Invicta on Saturday, and the UFC back in Scotland on Sunday. So
Felt like a fight week, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. I'm very tired.
Yeah, I can see
But
that.
I'm excited. I'm excited. All right, we shall say goodbye for now. For Luke, Chuck, Jeff, I'm Ariel. Again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the tour and the fights.